And then there's other guns. We all have ammo. We're just gun people. And I do carry a gun with me. My husband carries one. He never leaves home without his gun, or at least having one in his vehicle. Of course, he has police background. He's also he was an emergency medical tech, and he still is, in the rescue squad. So they deal with those kind of things, and he understands the importance of protecting yourself. Now, I know there's a million people out there who are going to disagree with all of that. You absolutely have the right to believe whatever you want to believe. But I believe differently. I believe that if you're raised to respect a gun and human life, that you won't have these issues, and you learn to respect those things. It's different. It's a different world we live in from where I grew up. Anyway, so this person supposedly is using a remake of a German Navy pistol. That narrows things down considerably. It's not a Ruger. It's not a Smith & Wesson. It's a German Navy pistol. Not something you see every day. Witnesses managed to describe a white male with red or light brown hair between 140 and 160 pounds and around 5'7", which is not a big man. Or person, but it says a white male, but it could be a female dressed like a male. Since the killing spree in 92, investigators suspect the I-70 killer has taken the lives of 2 more victims in Texas in 93 and another in Kansas in 2001. So how do you think they connected these murders in Texas and Kansas to the I-70 killer? They have to have similar MOs, right? They have to trace those victims. Perhaps the bullet that was used to kill them was a .22, and it turns out to be a German Navy pistol. The statistics on 2 serial killers using the same type of gun that's rare like that is slim to none. So that would be top 3 reasons why you would try to connect those murders. We will never know if they actually are a part of their series of killing, but until we find this person and if they admit it. So there's a lot of ifs there, right? In recent years, victims' families marked the 30th anniversary of the unsolved murders, and police released a new sketch of the killer. Today, Detective Kelly Rhodes with the St. Charles Police Department in Missouri works full-time on finding the killer, rereading all the original police reports, re-examining the evidence, and pursuing new leads and cures. Detective Rhodes said in an interview, "This is the future," or clues, not cures. "This is the future, so we're really hoping we get some good DNA from evidence. It's not like we're sending off one piece and hoping on that one piece. We have quite a bit that we've sent off." And sometimes it takes a very long time to get your DNA results back. Some places, you get it back within the week. Other places, 6 months or a year. And it doesn't mean that it's become a cold case during that time. The police are still working on this. They're still conducting interviews. They're still following up leads that they get. The vast amount of work that goes into working these kind of crimes is tremendous, and it's very, very expensive. You have like this detective. I mean, she may come across, when she's reviewing this case, she may come across a clue that no one else picked up on and have to fly to 2 or 3 different cities to meet with, other people, other police departments, and see if they can make connections between things that have happened there. So it's not just sitting in an office or maybe in that general neighborhood. It's nationwide, even worldwide. There's a lot of people there's several serial killers who have been caught outside the United States. But that is the work of many, many people and many, many different agencies. So it's an expensive thing to do. These people, it's hard. You shouldn't have to think about it this way, but it's true. When you're thinking about removing people from society, you want to save human lives, of course, that's first and foremost. And then you want to learn. The second thing is you want to learn from those people so that we do better in the future. But even if they get life in prison or if they get death penalty, it's still very expensive. Not only do they cost us valuable lives, millions of dollars are spent on these cases, which in a perfect world could be used for other things like homelessness, veterans, children, mental health, which needs tremendous help right now. So there's, it's much broader than one or two issues. It's a plethora of issues. In 2001, there was the West Mesa murders. Women began disappearing in the high crime area of Central Avenue in the West Mesa area of Albuquerque, New Mexico. Over 5 years later, a woman was out walking when her dog discovered a human femur bone. That happens all the time. Just your average dog walking along with their owner and they find bones. So if you ever have that happen, I'm not going to say I'd be excited about it, but I would probably be really interested in that. I don't ever want to get excited about that kind of thing, but if you find bones, if you find a human bone, that's one step closer to finding out who that victim was. It's a good thing. So when the dog discovered the human femur bone, it led to the discovery and excavation of one of the biggest crime scenes in American history. It took 11 years for the victims of the West Mesa bone collector to finally be identified. They called him the bone collector. Police uncovered 11 women and one unborn child. Police identified the pregnant woman as 22-year-old Michelle Valdez. Many of the victims were connected to the drug and sex trade, which is also very common, which investigators said made it difficult to establish timelines. Makes perfect sense, doesn't it? If you're in the drug trade, you're not going to be following your normal 8 to 5 schedule. If you're in the sex trade, you're not going to be following your typical 8 to 5 schedule. You're not going to be in the same place every single day. You might be in the same area, but certainly not the same place. And then if you are picking up people or people are picking you up, they're taking you to other areas where it's isolated so you can, do your drugs, do your deal, or do whatever in the sex trade that you are paying for. So timelines are difficult and locations are difficult. So it's really like shooting darts on a dartboard. The reality, however, is that Albuquerque police were warned for years that sex workers were going missing. In 2005, one of their own detectives began compiling a list of the missing. 10 of these women were later found deceased at the West Mesa site, which may only be one of several mass graves left by the killer or killers. So we know, thanks to a detective that just started compiling their own list, 10 of these women were later found in the same West Mesa site, and it would not be unusual for there to be several mass graves. The investigation is ongoing, and there's a $100,000 reward for information about the serial killer. A number of suspects have been closely considered over the years, including one that is already in prison and another one who is dead. That's another important point. Sometimes when these serial killings stop, it's not because they've gone dormant, it's because they died or they're in prison. So not only are detectives looking in cities and towns and making these connections just for the general citizen that could be the serial killer, they're having to look at people who have already passed away. They're looking at people who are already incarcerated that have these characteristics of whatever the serial killer's MO was in a particular case. So it's a ton of work, and I appreciate so much what they do. You have to love that. You have to love your job to remain that vigilant and hyper aware of what's going on in the community and in your area. So I appreciate all these investigators who are working on things such as this. In Chicago, they have the Chicago Strangler. It was reported in 2019, and police were launching a task force aimed at determining whether there was a serial killer stalking the city. It should have been done years ago, however, because the first women that were murdered was between 2001 and 2017. So you've got 16 years of murders that weren't put together. There wasn't a task force that was formed to even consider if it was a serial killer. And it wasn't until 2019 that they actually began to move on it and launched that task force and started looking at MOs. The task force came a year after the Tribune, Chicago Tribune, published its bombshell story connecting the deaths of nearly 75 women who were murdered in the city, of course, between 2001 and 2017. In a first ever analysis of its kind, the Tribune wrote, over the last 17 years, at least 75 women have been strangled or smothered in Chicago, and their bodies dumped in vacant buildings, alleys, garbage cans, snowbanks. Arrests have been made in only a third of the cases. Now, I don't know if you know this, but just some details. Strangled and smothered, two very different things. Strangled is when you typically have a ligature around your neck or hands around your neck, and they will typically break that bone. Is it the hyoid bone? I don't know. Hyoid bone. I can't even say it. I'm gonna look it up. Let's see. Hyoid bone. It's a perimortem hyoid fracture. Frequently indicates manual strangulation, although ligature strangulations, hangings, and other forms of trauma to the neck cannot be ruled out without additional evidence. The fracture of the hyoid bone are known to occur in 17 to 71% of fatalities following manual strangulation, but are infrequently recognized in survivors. So if you survive an attack where they're trying to strangle you or use a ligature or hang you, you probably won't have that hyoid bone fracture. That's one of the things that that the coroner is going to look for. You know, you'll probably have marks around your neck. I shouldn't say yours. The victim will have marks around the neck. If it's smothering, however, you're going to see like petechia in the eyes, in the whites of the eyes. Petechia is that little red blood vessels that have busted. That's due to lack of oxygen and the pressure of being smothered. There's a lot. You can look that up. It gets very complex in the differences, but it's all the same. Strangling is a much, I'm not saying worse, it's not a worse way to die, but it certainly takes more effort to strangle someone than it does to smother someone. It takes a long time to strangle someone. And typically, if you have a victim that's been strangled, it's probably going to be someone they know. That's not always the case. BTK, he used ligatures in strangulation. But he did not know his victims personally. So obviously that's not a hard and fast rule. But that would be an MO. Someone who strangles is different from someone who just smothers. Smothers, you put a pillow over their face and hold it down until they stop moving and quit breathing, and then they're going to have signs of petechia, and there's stress on their lungs. There's all kinds of things that help a coroner determine if it's strangulation or smothering. They used to, just a side note here, used to be an issue, if you recall, with children who would die in their beds, and they were being smothered, but it was only because, it wasn't because their parents or someone was smothering them, it was because they had too many blankets or pillows in their bed, and babies can't roll over on their own until they're considerably older.